Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to KRTD News. A little bit late today, with the holiday and everything. Everything's happening a little bit later. Sorry, everybody.
We're doing what we can. Happy Thanksgiving, Indigenous Genocide Day, however it is you want to look at it. We all recognize it. We are on stolen land, correct? Are we doing that today?
Oh, yeah. We are definitely on stolen land.
Yeah. Found out my favorite little news tidbit today. White people did not exist before 1681. Did you know that? Hi, Sandy. You didn't you? Bacon's Rebellion back in 1860 or 1667. And it was the Virginia governorship at the time. Bacon took over the Virginia colony, and as a result, some of the laws in Virginia revolved around the creation of race and class within the Virginia colony. So the first differentiation between black and white was created in Virginia law in 1705 as a result of Bacon's Rebellion. Anyway, yeah, another one of those tidbits of American history that we like to keep buried because they're embarrassing. Anyway, that is not what we are here to talk about tonight, folks. Sandy, I see you're up. Dolores, Kay, all glad to see you here this evening. Really appreciate you joining in. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. Shane, we have our first article up for this evening.
Yes, we do. So this one is, and let me adjust the screen here, because this looks awful.
Yeah, it's not exactly the best. We're currently working with our background here, folks. StreamYard is pretty good under most situations, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. So, Anarchist Dan is jailed for his tweets. Okay, now, this is another one of those attacks that we have on our First Amendment rights. What is it we can and cannot say in the public square, which a lot of us consider Twitter, Facebook, other social medias to be considered the public square, even though these are privately owned entities that are heavily subsidized by the U.S. government. Anyway, that's a completely different discussion. So Dan here, 34 years old. Let me go ahead and pull up on my screen. So,
and this is from the dissident, everyone.
Julian Assange in prison. Justice Charles Wood of the Westchester County Supreme Court said it's temporary ban imposed. Yeah, that is not the one I was looking for.
Okay. This is an article from the dissident. They do
great work. Substack article.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan Baker, a 34-year-old yoga teacher and medical technician trainee based in Florida with no criminal record. In January, Baker was arrested by the FBI, who claimed Daniel Baker's actions show that he was a dangerous extremist, and the law-abiding public is safer now that he's been arrested. We are and will remain on high alert and will take all appropriate actions against credible threats to the people of our district. Okay, now this is one of those things that's interesting because a lot of people who follow Dan Baker and his stuff recognize that it's a lot of hyperbole, a lot of cynicism, and a lot of, basically shit posting is what it comes down to, mixed in with a number of other things. Okay, now, despite that, Baker was sentenced to 34 months in prison and 3 years under probationary supervision for tweets. Okay. I really don't know how we can continue to go on with it because the situation's pretty straightforward. He was arrested for free speech that the government has decided was insightful. So Adam Schiff, one of the most pro-security state Democrats, has been pushing for a domestic terrorism bill to go after right-wing extremists. The increased FBI powers will result in more cases like Baker's, where leftists get arrested for supporting self-defense and using hyperbolic rhetoric online. And again, this is one of those things. Are you left with the hyperbolic rhetoric, or are you right with the hyperbolic rhetoric? Now, in this case, Anarchist Dan Baker, he leans left.
Yeah.
So it's not like this was a far right individual expressing, Nazi sympathies, white supremacist sympathies, etc. But actually doing the counter to that. Now, of course, we all have our different ideas as to what's left, what's right, and whether or not there's hyperbole is acceptable under certain circumstances. But again, this is one of those where we're looking at, okay. So a little on further down the line, the United States has imposed a higher Capitol Police budget after the January 6th riots. I love that they misspelled capital in that article. This led to a crackdown on leftist protests in Washington, D.C., such as when activist Liv Romano was arrested for carrying a bat at a protest protecting indigenous water, or when Capitol Police arrested protesters peacefully protesting the end of the eviction moratorium at the Capitol. Okay. Now, we're taking a look at this situation, and we're seeing more and more political arrests related to this. Now, in this, it's citing specifically leftists who were arrested, while we still have yet to see anything significant come out of, the January 6th events on the Capitol steps. Now, there have been arrests made, there have been charges made, but as far as everybody feels, it's not quite the equivalent of somebody getting 3 years in prison for tweets. It's not like what happened to activist Liv Romano, in relationship to what she was doing.
No.
So we're continuing to see that the politics in Washington still favor right-leaning activists and extremist groups, with lighter sentences, lighter events than what they are seeing from the left, or even anarchists. Dan Baker, he's an anarchist.
Exactly.
He's not a left authoritarian. He's not coming out with a commie rhetoric. He's not saying, we need to put, all of the non-believers up against a wall. Well, okay, maybe he did. But at the same time, he's coming at it from an anarchist. He's coming at it as a counter-authoritarian position. You need to look at that,
Here's the thing about that. He's a threat to the way things are done. Anybody who thinks differently, those of us on the left, in the libertarian sphere, or in the progressive sphere, or in the anarchist sphere, anybody who's suggesting we do anything remotely differently is dangerous because they're making that suggestion. And that suggestion is very dangerous because the powers that be like how things are being done now, and they want it to continue that way.
They like the pro-capital look, which is one of the reasons why the right-leaning libertarians are still considered an acceptable, activist group, despite the fact that they occasionally come off as a little anti-authoritarian. And to a certain degree, they will even accept leftist authoritarian philosophies coming across, in much the same way that Bernie is allowed, as long as he continues to accept certain state and government authoritarian rules at the federal level. So you see pro-federalist left. They're allowed to say whatever they want.
Well, everybody doesn't realize about Bernie is he made a deal in order to get elected in the first place. He was splitting the vote with the Democrat. The party offered him a deal. You have to vote with us 80 or whatever percent of the time. The other 20% you can do what you want to do, but you have to vote on the party line 80% of the time, and we'll let you have that seat.
Yeah, which was Bernie's deal with the devil. He had to caucus with the Democrats. And that's one of the situations where you get coming across as what is essentially the lone independent in Congress right now.
Well, what about the corporate independent, Angus King?
Pro-corporate, he can... how do you get in as a pro-corporate independent? I would have thought that, the corporate left or the corporate right would have, given him adequate incentive to come in on their side of things. But it's like right now, I guess he can get away with it because he's playing both sides of the fence.
Well, he had money. The Democratic Party also backed him against their I think it was a more progressive challenger who wasn't as corporate. I don't know how what they were, but they weren't as corporate as him, and then the Democrats backed him over their own nominee.
It's a dirty pool out there, folks. It's a dirty pool. That's all we can say. You know, when it comes time to drain in the swamp, you're looking at this. And literally, the Democrats have undercut their own party in order to make sure that pro-corporate personalities continue to find seats in Congress.
Getting back to Dan Baker, though, he's a guy who's saying things that threaten the norm. I know he's an anarchist. Let's look at some of the things in this article. Let's see what he said that was so horrible. I'm going to share the article again. Let's see if we could find any excerpts here.
The article you shared with me doesn't include any of the excerpts from his account.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Here's one. I swear to God, if y'all can't raise this money, I will start robbing the rich and pedophiles too. In reference to a GoFundMe campaign. Okay.
Right. Clearly humor and hyperbole.
Exactly.
Attempted kidnapping for a tweet saying leftists should drive violent right-wingers out of Tallahassee with every caliber available. I don't necessarily know that's attempted kidnapping.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would have seen that more as attempted murder. But anyway, so Natasha Leonard reported other tweets he was prosecuted for included memes featuring Homer Simpson, Baby Yoda, and a picture of a kangaroo. Twitter jokes.
Yeah. This is a guy who's playing around on Twitter.
Most of us have shared at one point or another. He is now in prison. Tallahassee, Florida. The FBI federal agency went into Florida, to specifically prosecute an individual for jokes and things he said about what he was going to do in Florida. And not even Florida government. This was the Federal Bureau of Investigation that went in and said, yeah, you're a little too extremist for us. You're a little too revolutionary. You're too counter-authoritarian. That's not going to work. And, honestly, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering who exactly he had for a lawyer.
Yeah.
Did he honestly decide to represent himself in this situation, or was the public defender just that inept?
That's a good question. But they really need to release him, honestly. Like, this is ridiculous. And here's the thing that a lot of people, believe it or not, on the left where I am, like to advocate for censorship and stuff. What they don't realize is they're advocating for censorship of things they don't like. But what happens is when you advocate for censorship, what happens then is, well, I don't like, let's give a random example. A lot of people on the left don't like Ben Shapiro, would like him to be censored what he's saying. Okay, now Twitter's censoring Ben Shapiro. They're also going to censor Jimmy Dore.
Yes. And that's actually exactly what this situation was. This was a left initiative trying to censor individuals, and ultimately the goal was people like Alex Jones, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk. Okay, the left was looking at being able to censor the rhetoric that's coming out of that side of things. However, once the FBI and the authoritarians in Washington, D.C., and even in the lower offices got a hold of this authorization to censor extremists, they didn't go after the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiros. They went after the Dan Bakers. They went after the Jimmy Dores. These were people who had strong, absolutely country is correct.
They know who they want to go after, but if you start advocating for censorship of just the things you want to be censored, that's not how it's going to happen. They're going to censor what they want to censor, and they might just censor everything. They might say, okay, No more Ben Shapiro. No more Charlie Kirk. No more Dan Baker, but also no more Jimmy Dore. No more lefties. No more anything. They might just censor us all if we continue like.
You know, it's one of those things. You know, I'm not afraid to make certain comments. Matter of fact, I probably shared several of the memes in which Jimmy Baker was Dan Baker was prosecuted for. You know, on Twitter no less. I see it as humor. I see it as hyperbole. You know, but apparently, I can be prosecuted and I can be put into prison for 3 years because I support Black Lives Matter and feminist liberation ideologies.
Well, you know, they got to arrest you now.
Well, they still have to arrest me. They can't just shoot me. Not yet. They're getting there. You know, but we are literally at that point, you know. So it's one of these things. If you are anti-authoritarian, you cannot be advocating for censorship of anyone, no matter how much we hate these people. You know, the thing is don't give these people we don't like an audience. You don't call for government censorship. You just deny them the audience. You deny them the clicks. You deny them the retweets. You know, and that's really the only way we're going to get into the situation where we are able to, you know, isolate the extremists. Now, to a certain degree, what this ends up turning into is self-segregation. You know, you end up in your own little tunnels, your own little information silos, your own little echo chambers, because you're separating yourself from these individuals who continue to spout rhetoric that you find dangerous. But we really cannot, under any circumstances, continue to support federal censorship of anyone. We need to do better at bridging the gap. We need to do better at crossing the borders. We need to be able to talk. Yeah, let's hope they don't shoot. Yeah.
And this is the biggest
shooting.
We'll
come back to shooting here in a little bit, Sandy.
This is the thing. You're right. And the other thing is everybody's in their echo chambers. And I may get a lot of shit for saying this publicly, but do you remember when Jimmy Dore had on, I think it was Magnus, I can't remember his last name.
Parvidier, actually, he just lost his Twitter account.
Oh, okay.
Twitter finally banned him.
Yeah. Do you remember when Jimmy Dore had him on? It was a big deal. Everybody was there. Everybody was yelling at him. What I saw there is Jimmy Dore everybody on the left just talks to everybody else on the left that if you don't expand your circles, you're talking into a void of people who only agree with you, and you can never get past that.
Yeah.
If you won't have conversations with people you disagree with somewhat or learn about what's going on, then you're not expanding your circles and you're staying in the exact same place, and your audience is going to stay the same.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems. We were looking at the issue, so let me go here and find it. So the thing is Magnus isn't actually a right-wing individual. He's not. Part of the thing is he was associated with a boogaloo. Now, there's a lot of different takes on the boogaloo. The mainstream media keeps saying they're right-wing activists, the right-wing, Nazi sympathizers. Yeah, absolutely, Sandy. Mainstream media is friggin' worthless these days. You know, you continue to see an awful lot of things that go in and go down along those lines. You know, but the thing is the Boogaloo was really truly an anarchist movement. It was no sides taken. You know, this was the state has exceeded its authority, and it continues to allow things that are dangerous to the people to continue to exist if it doesn't actually perpetuate itself. You know, so it's like the Boog's really neither a left nor right, but it's an anti-authoritarian movement.
It's like people talk about Antifa without actually understanding what it is, and they do the same thing with the Boogaloo boys. People talk about things, oh, this is what this is, but you really don't understand.
Yeah. Now, part of the problem is one of the best ways to discredit a movement is to join the movement badly.
Okay, you can leave now, and we can disagree. That's okay. We can disagree on that.
It's a good one. That's a good one. Jimmy Dore, right wing. Woo! Dude, I mean,
Yes.
I agree. He's split in the left, but right winger, man.
No, he pretty much aligns with everything. This is one of Joe Firestone's viewers. He's pretty much aligned with everything Joe Firestone wants to do. He just takes a very different approach, less academic and more angry and entertainment approach to doing those things. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Magnus, he's associated with Boogaloo. He still associates with Boogaloo. He still considers himself part of the Boogaloo Boys. And one of the things that you've noticed is the Boogaloo movement has actually fractured over the last 2 years. The people that were the authoritarian right that used to associate with Boogaloo have shifted. They now consider themselves part of the 3%ers or the Proud Boys or one of the other theocratic based, socially conservative movements on the right that want a restoration of, good old fashioned American values, whatever those were, and that's a big discussion. One we don't really have time for this evening.
Mm-hmm.
But, you start taking a look at the way these movements have morphed, the way personalities have come into these organizations, joined them badly, discredited them, then turn around and move to create movements more aligned with themselves, like the Proud Boys morphing out of the Boogaloo movement and so on. Pay attention to what's going on with movements. Most of the street level activists that were associated with the Black Lives Matter movement, a year ago, they no longer associate themselves with Black Lives Matter because, let's admit it, the nonprofit organization that was founded 3 days after that hashtag went mainstream turned out to be part of another political grift. It was another money laundering scheme for the Democratic National Committee. So street level activists that were part of the Black Lives Matter movement, they're now running their own street level nonprofit organizations, own street level activist groups under different names, but still with the goal of anti-racism, race abolition. That's a big one. Race abolition. I love race abolition as an actual term myself.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-racism, justice for underrepresented communities. These continue to form by people who were part of, and regardless of what the Black Lives Matter nonprofit organization has become or even was at its foundation, the movement itself has helped spawn several small, locally based organizations that are doing what we were told Black Lives Matter was supposed to be doing when they originally formed.
Yeah.
So pay attention to your movements, pay attention to your organizations. Don't trust the mainstream media. Every one of them has their own goals, has their own agenda. Look them up, find out what's going on with them, participate in the events that they do. Maybe it's the kind of event you're good with.
The thing is, you also have to look at some of the bigger ones. For example, on the left, you have the DSA. Some of the DSA chapters are okay, and they're trying to do something for real, and some of them are not, because some of them are not run by people who are actually trying to do. And it's the same thing in anything that has a group in 50 states, because 50 states is a lot of places. It's not going to be identical in every single state. You got to look at that. Yeah. When something has chapters, every chapter is going to be run differently, and some are going to be more effective than others. And if it has a national counterpart, sometimes the national counterpart is less effective than some of the chapters.
Yeah, I mean, some of the chapters have been extremely effective. The Black Lives Matter, what is it? The 747 chapter in, they've been extremely active, and they've taken the original Black Panther approach as far as armed representation, armed Black men out being part of their community. So the 747 BLM, perfect example of someone that has separated themselves from the original national chapter and created their own localized movement. Great effort, great people, and they're doing some incredible things. So,
Go ahead
The
and
key
get to
thing
our
on
next.
this, the key takeaway though, is censorship. We cannot be advocating for it, and above all, the state should in no way be infringing upon our First Amendment rights of free speech, freedom of press, and we need to correct this. People like Dan Baker need to be out of prison. Julian Assange need to be out of prison. We need to stop the persecution of several of our other whistleblowers. We need to be able to create this situation where whistleblowers can come out in the open without fear of persecution. And we've just done a really poor job of that as a nation. So
Definitely. I'm gonna go get the next article.
that's about it. Okay, so our next topic this evening, we are looking at New York Times. Okay, publishing the Project Veritas Documents. Now, the interesting thing about the Veritas Documents is this is the Biden Diaries. We're actually talking about an alleged release of the diaries of Joe Biden's daughter. And supposedly Project Veritas was actually able to acquire this and was working on it. Now, we all have issues with Project Veritas. They haven't exactly been one of those that have been the most reliable as far as data, but this is another one of those situations where the FBI have decided to raid, an independent press organization based on the claim of a diary that was written by Joe Biden's daughter. And again, I'm beginning to wonder exactly what the FBI's position on this particular case is that makes them think they have a case, or even the judge's position where he felt the FBI or the Department of Justice was justified in seeking a warrant for the search that they ran against Project Veritas. Now, of course, most of us are somewhat aware of what the rumors are with regards to what goes on. And a lot of this happens to be a right, Sandy? Oh boy. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
No, Jimmy doesn't kiss neoliberal butt, either party. He doesn't kiss neoconservative butt, either party either. I personally am not a huge fan of Jimmy Dore, unlike some other individuals. But at the same time, let's be honest about who he is. He is not a cowtoer. He doesn't kiss butt. He doesn't lick boots. And for an awful lot of people, that's a big problem. So,
yeah.
November 19th, court ordered the Times to show why the court should not instruct media organization to remove all references to or descriptions of Project Veritas's privileged attorney-client information published on the Times website on November 11th, and to immediately return and or immediately delete all copies of Project Veritas's attorney-client privileged materials that are in the New York Times possession. Okay, now this is one where Project Veritas actually gave the information to the New York Times. Okay, the New York Times ran with it. Now, this was extremely damaging to Joe Biden because if the diary is accurate, as Joe Biden's daughter's actual experiences on the campaign trail, a number of other things, you really have to begin to wonder the nature of the people who allowed Joe Biden to become president. This actually throws into a huge question the entire infrastructure of the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party as a whole, and above all, why a significant amount of this was continued to persist in U.S. Congress. Because Joe Biden, despite this is his fourth run as president?
Yeah, that a lot of people don't realize. Oh, this is his
Yeah.
first time running. What a great job he did.
No. Joe Biden ran 3 previous times. And each previous time there was something significant that discredited him. One was, the blatant plagiarism of a speech he gave as part of his primary candidate, or not primary, but it is, primary, as part of his primary candidacy run for the nomination. He actually blatantly plagiarized a speech. He was caught for it, withdrew his bid.
Gotcha. I want to play that clip here for everybody so you guys can see.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to play the clip, everybody. It's just going to take 1 second. Oh, awesome. StreamYard has a new thing. We can go back to using slides because we can share slides through StreamYard. Awesome.
Nice. Now, StreamYard's been doing some upgrades. We're still finding all the fun new things that they added to the process. Here we go.
Okay, there we go.
But this standard is not a measure of how we can evaluate the condition of our society. It cannot measure the health of our children, the quality of our education, the joy of their play.
If the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play,
let us pledge that our generation of Americans will pay any price, bear any burden, accept any challenge, and meet any hardship to secure the blessings of prosperity and the promise of opportunity for our children.
we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university?
Why am I the first kid in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
No, it's not because they weren't as smart. It's not because they didn't work as hard. It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent or the strength or the endurance or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
I mean, those are all iconic speeches. I can understand why he would forget that somebody else had given them before he wrote them.
Yes.
Sandy's got a question. How did they get the diary? Again, I think this is one of those things where I honestly believe that someone in Joe Biden's family, the daughter in question who actually wrote the diary, was the one who put it into the possession of the investigative reporters of Project Veritas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's extremely dangerous because, particularly to the power structure that be, because it paints Joe Biden in a very, very, very bad light.
Joe Biden does a very good job, though, of doing that himself.
He really does. He really does.
Yeah, Joe was always plagiarizing someone. Yeah.
But, part of, I think, the big thing that really came down to it was the implication that there would, I'm not going to go because it's a triggering topic for a significant number of people, including myself. The New York Times has access to the information. If you really care about what it is Project Veritas was able to dig up in the diary, I said the stuff that the New York Times has and was printed and made available it's covered in several places. It's covered in several topics, and it really, especially extremely dangerous. If it is true that Hillary Clinton came out in support of Joe Biden very recently, this is one of those things. Hillary Clinton's been associated with a significant number of things over the years, and for her to come out at this time to support Joe Biden in his presidency, particularly after this has come out, it doesn't actually do great things for either the Joe Biden campaign or the Clinton Foundation or Hillary Clinton's attempt to remain relevant.
Well, first of all, Hillary Clinton needs to learn something. Well, first of all, she needs to learn a lot of things, and I want to start with this. What she needs to learn is people do not want to hear from her for another certain amount of years, forever. People do not want to hear from her ever again. But she didn't learn. And, I have a lot of disagreements with John McCain, but he made an interesting point. He said, when I lost the presidency, there were a lot of things I wanted to say, but I shut my mouth.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote a book immediately after she lost the presidency, and the book essentially was whining about why she lost.
Right.
And she blamed Bernie Sanders. She blamed Donald Trump. She blamed the weather. Everything was an excuse.
Yeah. Why would she blame the weather? Of all of the things that could have gone wrong with her campaign, the weather was honestly the least damaging of all the things. There were plenty of other things that went wrong with the campaign. And one of them was the fact that she had actually spent a significant amount of time as a very close personal friend to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
How do you spend that much time as a close personal friend? And because he just happened to win the Republican primary, now he's public enemy number one?
Well, you see, she has to for theatrics, and did you ever see the debate done by the Free and Equal Elections Foundation for president? These are
no, I haven't.
Okay, so they did 3 debates during the presidential campaign. One debate they did with 30 people. When every third party was running their primaries, they did a debate with everybody from every single primary plus the independents, which was really insane. And then they did 2 debates after that. Now, in those debates, these are all people who disagree with each other. These are all people who agree on some things. These people, believe it or not, they didn't interrupt each other. They didn't try to speak beyond the time they were given. They didn't try to make a show of anything. They just answered the questions. And these are the third-party candidates for president, and they had a debate. When Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump had a debate, it had to be a show. It had to be, they all had to do these ridiculous things and, yell and like.
Right.
In the Democratic and Republican debates as well.
The theater of politics, political kabuki.
Those were the best debates I ever saw, better than the mainstream debates. You know why they were the best debates I've ever seen? Because they actually talked about the issues, and they all gave their opinions on the issues, and they talked about their policies and what they would actually do. Seems like the chat doesn't like Hillary Clinton.
Well, can you blame him? Hillary Clinton didn't exactly do the left any favors, or the Democratic Party during her time. The idea. I remember a comment about when she was First Lady of Arkansas, talking about the trustees that were essentially peonage, the slave labor for the governor's house, that maintained and kept the place up. Right? You had prisoners, trustees from the local penitentiary that were essentially unpaid labor in the governor's house. And here she comes off with this inane, comment about how amazing it was to have these black men. Yeah. Hillary Clinton did not do the Democratic Party any favors.
No, she didn't. And the Clinton Foundation, you mentioned, doesn't get any good life from this. The Clinton Foundation has one of the worst reputations. It has almost an equally bad reputation to the Trump Foundation. Those two foundations actually have some of the worst reputations you can find. Where's that money going? Nobody knows. It's going to all different places. Like those, her foundation just does not have a good reputation to begin with. She can't do it. What she needs to do is be quiet for the next 30 years, and then she can say something again. If she's alive.
If she's alive.
What it should be is an apology for setting everybody back and pissing everybody off and writing that ridiculous book and doing that ridiculous Hulu 3-part documentary where she whined about losing the presidency.
Okay, so let's stop doing this whole misogyny thing. Got it. We don't like Hillary Clinton. No sense beating up on her over the issues, especially considering we have current issues that we need to focus on.
But let's go back into the
they're back into the comments. She just needs to look at herself in the mirror. Even the weather hated her. Wish she could stay out of it all. Voted for Bernie. Yeah, I agree. She is very unlikable.
She probably never heard absence makes the heart grow fonder. Not keep in the spotlight as much as you can because people already hate you just to get them to hate you more. But I digress. So they're blocking this. I wonder where the judge stands. Why is the judge blocking this? What's going on? This is inhibiting another one. I think that's inhibiting free speech. These documents are there. They're public, or they're being made public by this organization.
They've been made public, and part of it is the judge actually wants the New York Times to do a retraction, as well as take offline all of the documents that they've been given access to for publication. And now this is one of those, we have investigative journalists who provided relatively solid evidence regarding the integrity or the authenticity of the diary itself. Therefore, the New York Times actually felt that they could move forward with it. This is one of those things. You don't go forward with claims like that unless your lawyers have blessed off and said, yes, you are the New York Times. Okay, you are considered, or at least were considered, to be a reputable organization whose words could damage reputations as well as careers of people. So you have an obligation to make sure that the things you print are accurate, especially when they're extremely volatile.
Which they do.
The Project Veritas got with their lawyers, who got with New York Times lawyers, validated the authenticity enough that the New York Times lawyers went, cool, you can print it. And at this point, we currently have a judge in New York saying, no, you got to pull it. You got to retract it. You got to pull it. And you got to make sure those documents are no longer available online. Okay.
That's inhibiting free speech again.
And it is.
It definitely. So this is, and it's a temporary ban. So how long is this ban? Can they repeal it? I don't know.
Well, it's one of those things. I think they actually have to wait until the suit is completed. Now, of course, if they're waiting for the suit to be finalized, if they actually want it to be drug out, it could be years, even decades before the documents are finally released. If the New York Times decides to honor the judge's gag order.
This is the ridiculous. This is what journalism is today.
Yeah.
Even when we try to do the right.
We spend more time in court over journalistic integrity than we do actually doing independent investigative journalism and being able to publish verified, authentic documents. And that doesn't even take into consideration the counter attacks against several of those documents. We've had investigative journalists go in and the Afghanistan papers, the Panama papers, all of these were well documented, well researched, forensic accountants, couldn't find anything wrong with these documents. They all got published, and literally the counter push against these documents pushed them so far underground, people had forgotten about them in less than a week. Despite the fact they specifically named crimes and violations of ethics, of people in Congress, in the executive branch, in as well as other governments around the world. That's where we're at. Disinformation and the denial of free speech, freedom of press, continues to push this information away and out of the sight of people who need to see it in order to make informed decisions about their politicians, about their leadership of the nation, if you can call it that these days. We need to make a better call for freedom of press, and that means getting people like Julian Assange, released, about making sure that these independent, they published Trump's niece. They published that right quick, didn't they, Sandy? Trump's niece, they published. Joe Biden's daughter, they won't. Go figure.
So we only have time for one more. Do you want to do the Rittenhouse, Aubrey?
Yes, let's go ahead and do that one. Let's cover that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the big things, we've had two trials that have recently closed out. One, of course, is the Rittenhouse trial for actions in Kenosha, Wisconsin. In that, the defendant, 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, who was 17 years old at the time of the event, was found innocent of all charges on grounds of self-defense. The other trial is the Ahmaud Arbery trial, in which three gentlemen in Georgia chased down a black man because they presumed this was the black man who had entered a construction site and then left. And they chased him down, cornered him, and in the pursuing incident ended up shooting him. Now, there's an awful lot of people from both sides saying, these are similar cases. Why did Kyle Rittenhouse get off and the Arbery's murderers didn't? And we start taking a look. We need to pay attention to the problem with the narratives around both of these cases. Okay, the narratives. The left has a narrative for each. The right has a narrative for each. Gun control has a narrative for each. Second Amendment rights activists have a narrative for each. But the problem is both of these cases were decided based on the laws in the area in which they occurred. The jury were given very specific and deliberate directions based on case law and precedents within each of these communities. And we need to... Sorry about losing your iPad there, Go Start. But the Kyle Rittenhouse, okay, he was defined as a self-defense. Reason why is because he was pursued by the first person who chased him. He tried to disengage. He was running away until he was cornered and could run no further, at which point Rosenbaum reached for his gun and Kyle fired and created the situation. From that moment, the second Kyle fired that trigger, it was a free-for-all. Kyle was innocent because he was defending himself.
My issue, though, with Kyle is that he was there in the first. I don't think that. I think he went there purposely to stir up some conflict in some ways, because you got to look at the other facts that were omitted from the trial. Of course, those facts are important as well. But there were, for example, his friend who's older than him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know how old the friend was? 26, 28, whatever.
He was older, but he was a friend from work because Kyle works in Kenosha. So a friend from work that, spent time working with Kyle, who 17, works across the bridge in Kenosha, 15 minutes drive from in front of his doorstep at his mom's house across the river in Illinois. You know, I mean, literally 15 minutes.
friend
That's all the further
who
the drive
purchased-
was.
Right.
You know,
And that's the friend who purchased him the gun, I believe.
Yeah, the friend purchased the gun. Now, that's one of those things that's interesting because under those circumstances, what's the legality for that transfer of authority with regards to the gun?
Now,
Okay,
my question is, are they prosecuting the right person? Regardless of what happened with Kyle, should they be prosecuting the person who allowed somebody under the age of 8, you know, who allowed somebody to use a gun for that? Should they be prosecuting his friend is my question, do you think?
Well, and that's one of those things, because based on the evidence at the trial, Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty by reason of self-defense. Okay, now in each one of these incidences, each one of the decision points of the evening, you know, I'm not talking about things that led up to, 3 hours into the evening. You know, Kyle's been doing what Kyle does, running around all over the place, putting out fires, offering people water, stealing some other medical supplies. You know, Kyle. Oh, you missed that one, didn't you?
Oh, that one? Yeah.
Okay, so during the testimony, it came out that, Kyle isn't actually EMT certified. Okay.
That's an
He
interesting
was not EMT certified. However, he was CPR certified, and he understood how to use the equipment because of the time that he spent working as a fire department, kiddie trainee thing. So he understood the equipment. But the thing is he showed up that night without enough of his own equipment. So at one point during the evening, one of the other people who actually showed up with a significantly better medic bag found Kyle rifling through it in order to plus up his own medical kit that he was running around all over the place with. Not exactly something that you cite as a character building thing, but at the same time, it wasn't grand theft.
No, well, but I do think that regardless of how the trial did come out, the judge was a little bit biased in Kyle's favor.
Oh, he was.
He was. And my issue is he omitted certain evidence. He said, oh, you can't use this word. You can't use this. You can't use that. You can't do this. So I think they need to do you can't try him again with the proper thing. You're not allowed to do a retrial. Well, I believe once the trial has been complete. That's just my understanding of it. So,
and that was another thing. The defense actually came back with 2 attempts to declare a mistrial. The first attempt was mistrial with prejudice, which wouldn't have allowed a retrial. The judge declined that. Then they came back later after they were aware that the prosecution had withheld evidence, and they were willing to give a mistrial without prejudice, which would have allowed a second trial. Again, the judge denied that. And the reason for, and that was one of the situations, is now that the verdict came back, they cannot retry Kyle Rittenhouse at the state level. Now, there's still rumor that, the federal prosecutors may come in and reevaluate the case and use federal law to prosecute Kyle Rittenhouse for the murders of Rosenbaum, Huber, and the assault on Grosskreutz. But again, that's not one of those things that's really out in the open right now. And after Kyle Rittenhouse's interview on Tucker Carlson, if any of you have actually gotten to see the Tucker Carlson interview or the excerpts of it with Kyle Rittenhouse, particularly where Kyle says, no, I support Black Lives Matter.
There are so many interesting.
There are so many things, but it's funny. If you watch the Twitter feeds on any one of those threads that started with that interview where Kyle said, I support Black Lives Matter, you watch heads explode. And it doesn't matter, right or left. Okay? If you're on the left, you're thinking Kyle's saying it because, he's trying to, garner sympathy. He's trying to, for lack of a better word, he's trying to whitewash his image. He's trying to clean it up. Yeah, I went to Mar-a-Lago. That's P stub. Put P stub up.
Okay.
P stub. Okay, I'm scared since the Rittenhouse case, it's now open season on protesters. Okay. Now, that's part of the problem with the narrative that's been created, because both the left and the right now believe that. And that's not actually what happened. Okay. Because this was a very specific situation. There was every decision point of the evening was well documented. There was video of every shooting, every event that led up to the shooting. Rittenhouse literally had so much evidence collected by people who didn't like him, no less. Okay, these were people who were there to protest and didn't like that Rittenhouse was running around with a gun. Were filming him the entire night. This was evidence collected by people who didn't like him. Okay, but there was video evidence of every decision point of every shooting that supported the jury's final verdict. Okay?
Absolutely.
That doesn't exist in 90% of the situations, which means if any one of those moments did not have video evidence by Wisconsin law, there's a good chance he would have been found guilty.
But there are other issues with the trial. I'm not necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't like how the judge is biased. The other thing, though, is his mother is another one I want to put up on screen. So this is an interesting one from Sandy.
Transporting a minor across state lines with a gun. Now, again, this is another thing. There's some disinformation in that, Sandy, and this was actually brought up in trial. Okay, the gun was in Wisconsin. It was in Kenosha. His friend, the 26-year-old that we were talking about earlier, actually held the gun for him because Kyle used stimulus money, gave it to his friend to buy the gun for him, and his friend was going to hold it until he turned 18. When his mother drove him across the border, 15 minutes from home, to the place where he worked to meet his friend in Kenosha, where she thought he was going to go do Boy Scout things and, scrub walls and take off graffiti. I don't know. But she didn't know that Kyle was going to get a gun as soon as he got over on the other side, because the gun wasn't in her car.
So the
and that was something that came out in trial.
Right. So he was supposed to get that gun when he was 18, and that was the agreement, whatever. So should the friend now be on trial for violating laws? Because the friend seems to be the one who's responsible for a lot of this, if you actually look at it.
If you do, again, and that's going to come down to Wisconsin law, is whether or not the friend transferring possession of the gun from himself over to Kyle, who was 17 at the time, was a violation of state or federal law. Now, it's probably a violation of federal law, which means his friend may end up with federal charges, for providing a minor a gun without going through the appropriate background and security checks per an official transfer of a firearm in the United States. Mind you, it's not something I'm going to endorse. I think the trade was legitimate, but there are a lot of people who think it wasn't. And we will see whether or not the federal agencies, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms decide to prosecute based on that transfer of the firearm under those circumstances.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, how that all relates to the Ahmaud Arbery. And this is another one that's beautiful. Reason why is because the Ahmaud Arbery shooting was documented. Okay. There was video evidence. Randy, the neighbor who participated in the second assault and the unlawful detention, unlawful imprisonment. Okay. So you take a look at the three, there were 9 charges that were involved. The malicious murder, or murder with malice, which was the primary charge. Only one person was found guilty of that, and that was the person who pulled the trigger. Okay, there were four felony murder charges associated with that. Reason why there were 4, okay, this was 5 murder charges for 1 murder, mind you. The reason there were 4 felony murder charges was because there were 4 dangerous felony crimes that were committed that led up to the murder.
Yeah.
There were the 3 assaults and the 1 unlawful imprisonment. Okay, which is why the kid who pulled the trigger, he's going away for a long time regardless. You know, murder with malice. I don't know whether or not Georgia has the death penalty or not, but that is a very real situation. But it's also the reason why the father, who was there for all 3 felony assaults, didn't get the murder with malice charge.
Mm.
Okay, but he still came up with 4 felony murder charges himself, as well as guilt with the 4 felonies that were associated with each of the felony murder charges. Now, there was video evidence of this as well. Okay, so Brian, who was the one who made the evidence available, probably against attorney's advice, because at this point, you know, it had been about, 6 months since the murder before Brian made his video available to the public, because Brian was trying to justify what happened. He was trying to tell the world that, no, this was a self-defense case. You know, Ahmaud grabbed the gun. Okay. Rosenbaum, remember that? Rosenbaum grabbed Kyle Rittenhouse's gun. Kyle was found not guilty because Rosenbaum chased him down and grabbed the gun. Okay. In this exact opposite, in this similar situation, here we were, 3 white men surrounding 1 black man. They had their guns drawn, pointed at Ahmaud, when Ahmaud reached for the gun and grabbed it. Okay. Yet the Georgia jury, unlike the Wisconsin jury, in that exact same situation, understood this was a felony murder charge, because these 3 white gentlemen that had cornered Ahmaud Arbery had initiated the dangerous situation and had made no attempt to disengage, at which point Ahmaud Arbery, ended up doing what he could under the circumstances, where Ahmaud legitimately feared for his life. Here you are in Georgia with 3 white men in shotguns and pickup trucks that have just spent 15 minutes chasing you down and cornering you, and now have shotguns pointed at you.
Mm-hmm.
Ahmaud feared for his life. He made an appropriate decision based on the escalations created by the 3 white men, and a jury found all 3 of them guilty of at least 3 charges of felony murder, minimum. But again, this was video evidence and eyewitness testimony. So there is a clear and very distinct line. Okay, the narratives have been creating this idea where it's open season on protest, and it's not. Okay. There are still very clear delineations between what is self-defense and what is creating a dangerous situation and commission of murder.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
we may not like where that line is currently drawn.
Yes.
Okay. But that line exists, and it's pretty damn solid right now.
Now, the mainstream media was much more interested in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial than they were in the Ahmaud Arbery trial.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the reason for that was, from a publicity standpoint, Kyle Rittenhouse was looking like the darling of the right. And that's going to get a lot of viewers talking about Kyle Rittenhouse. Talking about Ahmaud Arbery, which happened a while ago.
It did.
And it's another shooting of a black man, and they've covered so many of those. But this guy, he's got a lot of visibility. He's important. It's a big thing. They can get miles out of his coverage.
Oh, yeah. Huge miles. especially when you're taking a look at the proximity to the event. Now, the thing is Kyle Rittenhouse's story was public, before the fire stopped burning in Kenosha. I mean, literally everybody on both the right and left had already made a decision on Rittenhouse's innocence or guilt before the fires in Kenosha stopped burning. Where in the Ahmaud Arbery, this had literally gone, close to 2 months, 3 months before it was made public. Matter of fact, in the Ahmaud Arbery trial right now, the prosecutor at the time the murder happened, who was the first person called by the father to discuss what had happened, actually advised the father on what to do and interfered with the investigation. She has currently been brought up on charges and has been arrested for interfering with the investigation in the death of Ahmaud Arbery.
Wow.
Didn't know that, did you, Shane?
No, that I did not hear.
No, the police conduct in the Ahmaud Arbery, and that's prosecutorial misconduct because they interfered with the investigation. Yeah, it took over a month to even arrest him. But the police that are associated with that investigation, the prosecuting attorney that was the prosecutor at the time, who should have made sure the investigation occurred, deliberately interfered. She's currently up on charges associated with that. So there is the good old boy network inside whichever town in Georgia that is, that squashed it for a month. And it still would have been squashed if Brian hadn't put out his videotape evidence of the murder, trying to defend himself to his friends. It's like, no, man, here's what happened. Here's the video of what happened. I caught it on my dash cam. Facebook. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
National outcry, national outrage, and less than a week later, everybody was being investigated and the Aubrey murderers were, in jail upon trial. And people were trying to figure out, why did it take a month for this to happen? Right to remain silent. I'm glad. Okay. Do not mistake me. I am glad that those 3 individuals went to trial and answered for their crime. But from a legal perspective, your right to remain silent.
Mm-hmm.
Way to turn in state evidence against yourself.
Well, they probably would have found it anyway, but it would have taken them a lot longer.
Maybe, maybe not. The thing is without that video evidence, and with the interference that the police and the prosecuting attorney had in the initial investigation of that case, it is quite likely that, without that video evidence coming to light,
they may not have even known it existed.
They never would have been brought to justice, not in the way the good old boy network in that old Georgia town was working.
Nothing interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think it was kind of a little late to do that, Ghost Star, but it definitely would have been one of those situations. And the thing is honestly, I think the father thought that he was, in a sense, deputized because he was a retired law enforcement agent, from that particular town, which is why he thought he had the authority to do what it was he did.
No, they said we trapped him like a rat.
They did. And they did, and that was another thing is, you got 3 people up on the stand, and the 3 people couldn't come up with the same consistent story. They were all on trial at the same time. They all had the same defense attorney, and the 3 of them could not get their stories straight on the stand, but again, my point on this is whether you like where the line has been drawn. Okay, disregard the narratives. The narrative of the left, the narrative of the right, both are set up to create situations that are dangerous. Okay, it's creating situations where people think they can shoot when they can't, which is going to get people dead. and it's going to get shooters put in prison when they think it's a just shoot. Okay? No. That line is solid. These two trials defined that line, and it is very, very specific. Okay, so take a look at the evidence. Understand the precedence that was set by these jury verdicts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like these days, you pull a trigger, there better be video evidence that it was self-defense, or you're going to go.
Definitely. Anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in today to KRTD News.
Absolutely, thank you. Go start, K. Ryan. The rest of you definitely love the questions, love the comments, appreciate it. You know, I'm Idaho Joe, co-host Fourth Fridays, and Shane.
Shane, you all know me already. Okay. Oh wow, we got a couple of Facebook viewers today. That's new.
Nice.
Thanks everyone for watching on Facebook now too. Yeah, we also stream there already. Okay. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week, and you'll see everybody in 3 weeks.
Sounds good, Shane. You guys have a
Bye
great night.
everyone.